Awesome. Thanks so much for everyone coming here today. We are pre-med CC, and we have our speaker, Arad Arastech, who is a first-year medical student at the University of Arizona College of Medicine in Phoenix. He graduated from Chandler-Gilbert Community College in May of 2022. He then attended Arizona State University and graduated in May 2024 with a bachelor's in biological sciences. Arad is an immigrant and moved here from Iran around 6 years ago. And during college, he was involved with student government, on-campus volunteering, and peer mentoring. He has also spent 2 years in a wet lab researching the human gut microbiome. And he was also part of the Pre-Med CC leadership team during his time in college. Thanks for joining us, Arad. I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you for giving me this opportunity. And today I just wanted to talk about my journey, and I'll do that by sharing my screen. I have a small presentation. All right, let's do it. Share. All right, can you see my screen? Cool. All right, so we're going to talk about how I ended up from a community college to medical school. All right, I just want to give a little bit of background about myself. The kind of introduction covered pretty much most of it, but I moved here from Iran around 6 years ago, and I moved to Arizona, and I attended a high school here for 2 years. I finished my junior and senior year here, and this was during COVID, the 2020 kind of mayhem. So I didn't have a graduation, and then I attended community college, just kind of I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life back then. So I was like, okay, community college is the move. And I went to Chandler-Gilbert Community College. I enjoyed my time there so much. I did two associates, one in arts and one in science, I think. It's been so long. And after that, I transferred to Arizona State University and kind of finished that degree in biological sciences. And during my senior year, I applied for medical school, and I applied as somewhat you would call like traditional student. I didn't take a gap year, but I don't like the word traditional at all. Just like you're an applicant, like there's no traditional, not non-trad, right? And I'm a current MS1 at U of A, Phoenix. We're in like our third month of med school now, which is insane. All right. Okay. I just want to kind of go through a timeline because I feel like when I was a pre-med, like there was no timeline that I could kind of relate to or like kind of see like what everyone does during what period. So I just want to take a little bit of time about that, kind of explain the timeline and kind of tell you like what I did during these years. So 2020 in May, graduated from high school. Then in August, I enrolled in community college. I was late. I got to pick the worst classes. I didn't know what rate my professor was. I learned the hard way. Highly recommend you look up your professors on Rate My Professor. It saves the day. Because like GPA is like half was your effort and the other half is like how lucky you get, like in my opinion. And so 2020, August till December, that was my first semester of community college. I was like, okay, what do I want to do? Just general classes, just took the basic kind of gen eds. Bio one, like the first biology you ever take was also part of it. So that's where I got introduced to biology. I was like, this is somewhat cool, but it was during COVID and I was like, nothing makes sense. Everything was virtual. We kind of pushed through till the next semester. Took more classes. Okay, took on leadership roles like kind of early on. So I was like looking to get a job on campus and kind of see what I can do within my community. So I got a job as a peer mentor, or what they used to call them as peer success coaches. So basically, I was just a mentor for first year students, like how I can be successful in college and all that. I mean, to be honest, I was figuring it out myself too when I was doing that job. So I was like, oh, this resource is cool. So I'll just use that for my own and kind of finish all this basic stuff. And then second year of community college came. I was like, okay, what am I going to do with my life? Am I going to go to my university here? I'm going to go somewhere else? What career I'm going to do? So I started to kind of network a little bit and see what career options appeal to me, take all those career tests and all that and find out what my interests are. So as soon as I started doing that, I was like, okay, something in the healthcare field. It's very kind of, you get to give back to the community, and it's very fulfilling. So I really enjoyed service as well. So I start volunteering, and that's when I started like, okay, going to the hospitals, and kind of volunteering. The first thing I ever did was I was a transport volunteer in a local hospital, and I would just like move patients around the hospital or when they get discharged. And it was like my very, very kind of basic introduction to medicine. And at first I was like, okay, this is kind of boring, just moving around people. I was like, okay, what else can I do? So I started like looking at different things. I found hospice. So I started volunteering in a hospice, and I found it to be very, very fulfilling. And I did it in kind of somewhat a remote area in Arizona. So I would like drive an hour every day, not every day, every weekend, and kind of go to a senior housing, and I would spend some like half the day kind of going to each resident's house and like start talking to them. And at that point, it was just mainly hospice patients, but there were some like just regular patients who were not on hospice care, just living in that senior housing. So I just found it very fulfilling to kind of be in that environment and kind of be able to serve them. And I wish I could have done more. So that was like, okay, medicine is might be the move. So that's my first kind of spark, and I was like, okay, I want to do that. And by the end of 2022, May, I think it was, and I graduated from community college. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go to my state university, finish up my bachelor's, and take the MCAT, and then apply to medical school. I was so set, but then I was like researching stuff like, okay, what's a competitive applicant like? I was like, oh, you need research. Oh, you need more leadership. You need more volunteering hours. I was like, oh, panic mode. So that summer after graduating from a community college, I was like, okay, now I gotta get my things together. So I was like, okay, find a doctor to shadow. In the hospital I volunteered at, I reached out to him. I was like, okay, are you like hiring for an actual position that I can like do more things with patients? So I became a paid transporter, but this time I'm like moving patients, from the OR to the kind of the pre-op area or back to post-op area. So just basically more hands-on, and like I would help the patients or like maybe slide them onto the CT machine table. So it was more hands-on, and I was able to like do a lot more. And I really found that fulfilling. And I was like, okay, I want to do more. I want to do more. So I was like, okay, scribing might be fun. I scribed for a little bit during that summer, and I was like, okay, I'm not a good typer, so I'm not gonna scribe. So there are like certain things like I feel like scribe is like a very huge thing, but then the pre-meds, it didn't work out for me. But I mean, if it works out for you, it's a very good experience because you can really connect with physicians, and like that would be a really good kind of source for you to either shadow them down the road or for a letter of recommendation. And a letter of recommendation is something I'll talk about in the future slides. But back to that summer, so scribing didn't work, and then I was like, okay, new semester's about to start. Start doing all that fun stuff. Start taking like upper division classes. And I was lucky to find research. So that summer, one thing I also did, I cold emailed, I think it was 100 professors at my university. I was like, oh, I need research. So I just cold emailed, and two people reached back to me. One gave me an interview, the other one was like, yeah, we're full. So that one interview turned into a research assistant position, and that's the gut microbiome research. So I was working with a postdoc, and I would just do like experiments in the lab, learning more about the mechanisms of the bacteria and all that fun stuff. It was a really good way for me to kind of solidify my basic science foundation, because I feel like whatever I'm learning in the classroom, I can't really apply it. But when I saw it in the lab, I was like, okay, this actually makes sense. And that's what I really enjoyed about research, but it depends what kind of research you do, to be honest. I think the best research anyone can do is clinical research. It's easy, more hands-on, more applicable to actual medicine. Anyway, I continue working at that hospital as a transporter, and continued doing all the volunteering on the side. Some of the things I did was like produce distribution. So that was like in our community college, they would have free food for the community like once a month, or was it twice a month? And they would just come in, and then I would like we would load them up, and then on they go. And then it was very fun, to be honest. It was like very team based, and you're also giving back to the community. I also did like soup kitchens, like help in homeless shelters. And one more thing I did. Oh, and I was a foster youth mentor. So for the students who were in foster care and wanted to pursue college or community college, I would volunteer as a mentor for them. And I found that to be very fun, because it was a something kind of I had never done before. It was a population I was not really familiar with, but we could really relate, because like I moved here by myself when I was 16, and I was like I had to figure a lot of things on my own, and now I get to give back to kind of people who are in the same kind of scenario. But it was very fun. I really enjoyed it. And that passed along, and now we start the second semester of ASU. I'm in my third year now. I'm like, okay, we got to study for the MCAT. So I go on and I sign up for a May MCAT date in 2023. And okay, how do we study for this? Now this is where I turn to the very dark side of Reddit. And when like scrolled all the way, I was like, okay, what's going on? I was like, oh, there's a lot of resources. So what I decided to do, I'm gonna give everything a try, but not so long, because I only have 5 months to prep. And okay, I was like, Anki, what is that? Let's learn about that. And there's so many decks and all that. So Anki is basically a space repetition kind of software you can use. And there's a lot of like you do flashcards, and the based on how well you know the cards and how like the inputs you give to the app, it kind of creates a study plan for you that like it shows the cards based on how well you know them and how well you don't know them. So, and there were already pre-made flashcards for kind of MCAT stuff, and they're all over Reddit, all over Jack Weston, and all that stuff now. So, I gave this one that was very well regarded, the Mile Down deck, and I used that to study for my MCAT. And when I was doing it, I was like, okay, this is actually very neat. It was very concise, and it was like active recall of the things I was learning. So I really enjoyed doing that. And I was like, okay, how can I like do practice questions? Because I was like just reading things or like just doing Anki and watching Khan Academy videos is not enough. I want to apply this information. That's how I learned. So, okay, back to Reddit. Let's find out what question banks are good. I was like, okay, there's so many options. I was like, UWorld sounds cool. Has so many reviews. I'm gonna stick with that. And I don't regret that at all. UWorld literally saves the day. So if there's one thing that you can use for pre-med, med school, all that is UWorld. Like for MCAT, it carried me. I'm very sure for steps it will carry me too, because it's just gold standard. Whoever writes them, they're geniuses, like straight up. Um, I highly recommend UWorld. Like one thing for MCAT that you can't disregard is UWorld. Anyway, and I also applied for the fee assistance program and for AMC. So that's if you don't, or if your family doesn't make above a certain amount of money, you get qualified for free MCAT study material. So that's includes five full-length exams, um, around like thousands of questions. They have like question packs, section banks, and a bunch of diagnostic tools. So I was fortunate enough, I got those for free, and it gives you a discount on MCAT. And also when you apply, you get 20 schools free for primary, and a lot of med schools waive your secondary fees. Anyway, so when I got the free AMC stuff, I was like, okay, now I can like do the actual test writer stuff, and kind of start using them a month or a month and a half before my test date. And I kept a log of like my scores and like the trends and all that. And then I was like, okay, am I happy with my where my average is? I took the MCAT and that was it. Like I took the MCAT and I was like, okay, ooh, that was a lot. And now we got to panic because it's May of 2023 and we're applying this cycle. Okay, now we have to do personal statement, we have to do activity section, we have to do so many things. We have to get a letter of recommendations and all that. So as soon as I was done with the MCAT, started writing all this stuff up and start emailing the professors I've worked with. I took classes with the kind of faculty that mentored me for my research, the doctors I worked with, supervisors, and all that. So I reached out to all of them. I was like, okay, I need a very strong letter of recommendation for medical school. And I asked them to just keep it general because I was going to use it for every single school. And I attached my personal statement to it, my activity sections. I turned that to like his CV. So I just sent my CV, personal statement, and my transcripts. I was like, okay, this is what I got. And they were like, okay, yeah, I got you. And then I was like, okay, how do I restore this? And there was uh Dossier, I think it was called Interfolio, and it's like where you can store your letter of recommendations, and it's a very secure software that AMC approves. So that connects your letter of recommendation to AMC, and that way you can just use one platform to store everything for that. And they also connect with Ecomis, which is the DO application. So that way I was like, okay, I'm just gonna keep the letters in here and I can use them for both applications. And I was like, okay, now we have our letters, we have our personal statement done, we have our activity section done, and now we have to submit. So I submitted, and I was like, I only submitted to one school because I still hadn't had my MCAT score back. So for the timeline wise, so for med school, like application and all that, you want to apply early, and I was like panicking. Oh my God, I'm like a day late after the deadline, but okay, that doesn't matter at all because they take around a month from when the first kind of submission date is for them to even transmit the information to medical schools. So there's no need to panic so much until like you're in December, you know? That's when you should really panic. Um anyway, so I got everything in like mid-June, end of June, and I got verified mid-July, and that's where when I started getting secondaries. And I was like between the period that I was waiting for my score and kind of waiting for the secondaries to come, I went on the another very dark side of the internet, the student doctor network, and I found the secondary prompts from the previous years of those med school apps and use them to kind of pre-write. Okay. So that's another advice that I have is like you should pre-write your secondaries after you submit your primary application. And because that saves you so much time. Secondary, like writing secondaries, it's just like very daunting. Like, especially if you apply to a lot of schools, it can be very daunting. Like you're gonna be writing every day, every single day. It's like so much writing. And I try to kind of use unique stuff for different schools. And so that I was like trying to do research on the school, find out their values, find out their resources, find out their opportunities, find out what the culture was like, how do they vibe. And I was like, okay, I need to incorporate all of that. And that took a lot of time. So if I didn't pre-write, I wouldn't have been as early as I was. So whenever secondaries came in, I pretty much had them done and I would just submit. So that really saved me time and I don't have to like kind of have that stress that I have so many secondaries that came in. And now I'm kind of panicking that okay, I have like 30 secondaries to do and I haven't done any of them and they're all like in my mailbox right now. So having that not be a stress for you, I think is very important because the application cycle itself, it's not fun. Like I'm gonna be honest, like that is one of the worst part of this process because it's so uncertain and there's so many things they got to do. Like you do everything right and it might not work out, right? So just that uncertainty the whole time, it just sucks. So that's why I really recommend you kind of be on top of everything because that way you're kind of minimizing the chances of it not working out. And anyway, after submit the secondaries, now we're in kind of August, September-ish, and now we're prepping for interviews. Interview invites start rolling out, and you're like, okay, how do I prep for interviews? Um, Turn back to Student Doctor Network because they have kind of compiled interview questions that some applicants kind of put in there as like a survey. So you can kind of see the list of the questions. So I use them to prep. And also, I've kind of to our school, ASU, and I'm pretty sure like pretty much all the pre-health offices in every college and university offers this. But I did a mock interview with them, and I was like, okay, what does it feel like to be interviewed? Because that's the most important thing. Like, how's my body language coming out? Am I rambling? Am I being concise? And am I providing too much or too little information? And for med school interviews, the most unique thing is that they're so different because you can have a traditional interview, you can have a group interview, and you can have a multiple mini interviews, which is called MMI. So a traditional interview is like, okay, it's kind of like a job interview. So they're like, why medicine? Why our school? Tell me about your research. Tell me about your college. Tell me about your grades. Tell me why your car score is bad. That was a question I had. And that would be the traditional one. And then we have your kind of group interview. That is very uncommon, but I had one school that kind of put us all like it was five applicants in kind of one breakout room, and they would ask questions, and we would just take turns answering them. So I found that very interesting because you can see like who is trying to like go first and kind of assert dominance. That's one way I would put it. And the like other low-key people. So I don't know how they actually assess it. They just want to see if you can work in a group and if you can come up with new ideas when the idea that you kind of previously had was taken by someone else. And then how well do you kind of how well are you able to understand the other perspectives? Because sometimes they're like ask you, okay, do you agree with person Y's view? And then if not, why? And then you have to kind of come up with professional ways of kind of disagreeing with things. And then you have the kind of the almighty multiple mini interviews, which a lot of schools use. So MMIs, they're like basically could be scenarios, could be just your typical traditional interview question, or it can be a kind of a role play. So for scenarios, that would give you like, okay, so you are part of this community and you want to give back to like groups X and Y, what would be the reason and how would you do it and blah blah blah. So you gotta come up with an action plan. And one recommendation I always have is like whenever it comes to any interview, try to draw up on your own experiences because that's kind of lets them know that okay, I know I'm able to critically think about this and I've had experiences in certain scenarios. So having the opportunity to kind of draw back on your own experiences or kind of sharing skills that would be relevant to that scenario are very valuable. And so that was advice. And for the scenario stuff, so as soon as you kind of answer the question, the way I structured mine was, okay, I'm gonna kind of give a little summary about what the scenario is, where I am in this position, give my personal example or skill, and then I would kind of have a small conversation about it. And then I would leave around like 2 minutes because multiple minute interviews, they're timed. I think that's a very important thing to note about them. So like you would have maybe 1 minute to read the question, 1 minute to think about it, and depending on the school, 5 to 8 minutes to answer the prompt. So for the first kind of 1 minute, I did the summary, as I said. Then I did my personal experiences. And then for the next 2, 3 minutes, I would kind of have a um kind of a conversation going on and kind of build up on what I have already stated. And after that, I would kind of leave up time for questions because in my experience, the majority of schools, when you had MMIs and you finish early, they would ask you follow-up questions and they have a list of them. And if not, it was just mainly just conversing with them about like, oh, what do you do in the school and all that. Some schools don't allow that because they don't want any biases to be introduced. So it just depends on kind of what questions you get and what school you're in. But I would always recommend like ending early is better than getting caught off by the timer. And not rambling is the best thing you can ever do in MMI. Like do not ramble. Like if you need to end early and you're like, oh, I only talk for 2 minutes, that's way better than just like saying things that don't make sense or they don't add any value. And for traditional questions, they're basically, like I had one school that was like, oh, why medicine as an MMI question. So I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I would answer it as a traditional interview question, and they ask follow-up questions about different things. Like one thing to keep in mind is like know about the school and know why you want to attend there and some unique opportunities. And for kind of role play, like that might, so one example I can give is that for one of the schools, there was an MMI panel where you would have standardized patients. So those are kind of paid actors who play as patients. And I had a scenario that I'm a caseworker or a social worker, and this patient's going through a hard time, and I'm going to kind of offer them my empathy and my resources. So I had to play, 5 minutes with the SP about like, oh, I'm a social worker and you are a patient who's going through this. How am I going to handle it? So you basically act as if you would be in that scenario, which is very interesting. But I would say in med school right now, like we have standardized patients that we see, and we are acting too. Like I see them, but like I know we were both acting. Like so, it's a very good skill to build early on, and it would really help you. And kind of that pretty much covers the MMI stuff. And when you do your interviews and all that, you get your acceptances and you now have to kind of decide where am I going, pros and cons. Some of the things I would suggest is look into the friendliness and the kind of the culture of the school. And that's like one of the reasons I chose U of A, UA Comp. It's because they're very collaborative and we are kind of everyone's like united. We share resources. We kind of care about each other. We are very um we all work as a team, which I found very unique to the school. And I really vibe well with the students and the faculty during the interview days. And when you get accepted, you get to do revisit days, second look day. That's pretty much like they put programs for accepted students to kind of sway your decision towards that school. So when I did all that, I was like, oh, okay, so very, very like kind of chill school. And other things I looked at, I was like, okay, how's the curriculum? So I suggest that organ-based or system-based curriculum are the best. So medical school curriculum can be, so you have first and second year to be your kind of preclinical stuff. So that's basically all the sciences you learn, the biochem, the histology, the pathology, the immunology, all that fun stuff. Some schools, like U of A, they do this called organ-based or system-based, which we talk about the biochem, pathology, immunology, oncology of that organ. Like let's say right now we're talking about musculoskeletal system all at once. So I don't have a biochem course that talks about everything all at once. I have like very specific biochem stuff about that organ I'm learning, which I find very helpful because you get to have the holistic view of whatever you're learning about. And it's really it's very clutch for kind of overall being prepared for your exams and also for your future boards. Um, but other schools do like traditional kind of curriculum, which is like, okay, you take biochem for your first 6 months, and then you take anatomy, and then you take pathology, and then you take immunology and all that. When it comes to third and fourth year, during your clinicals, practically all schools are the same. You have to do your general rotations, family medicine, internal medicine, psychiatry, OBGYN, uh, good old surgery, and blanking on a few others. And then you get to do electives. And then fourth year is practically just a bunch of electives, and you do emergency medicine rotation in critical care. And I appreciated UA Compy's um, kind of pass fail curriculum that was organ based. So med schools nowadays are either graded, ranked, ranked with pass fail, or just good old pass fail. So graded, you get like A, B, C's and all that. You get a GPA. Ranked, you get your GPA, and you also get your, okay, I'm like number 12 out of 10, 12 out of 120 and all that. And you have pass fail with ranked, which is like, okay, you pass the exam, but you also get a rank, like, okay, or you get a quartile, like so like I'm 25th percentile of my school and all that. And then the way UA Compy does it, and a lot of other schools too, they're just pass fail. There's no ranking. So like for our first and second year, we either pass or fail, and we don't get any like actual numerical like a value that like, okay, am I number 10 in my class, or am I number 120? So you don't get into that, which I think really adds to the friendliness of a school and kind of the overall like collaborations the students do. And in our third and fourth year, some schools have ranking. Our school has high pass, pass, fail, and we have honors, which kind of for rotation makes sense, because that's like really matters for residencies, because like you rather have the honors for the specialty you're trying to go to rather than just a good old pass, right? So that's pretty much it for kind of the medical school curriculum, and that's how I kind of finalized my choice at UA Compy. And I've also lived in Arizona since I've moved to the US, and I was already comfortable with the area, and I already have my support group established here, and this system works for me, so that's why I stayed here. And that's when I was like, okay, I'm gonna commit to U of A. I did that this kind of past May, and kind of they send you a bunch of paperwork. You do like your immunizations, you get your shots and all that, and then you start medical school. So now I'm like 3 months in, and life's good. All right. Now I just wanted to kind of focus on a little bit about like applying to medical school, and kind of give some general tips and kind of tricks about what the overall approach I took, and some of the advices I took from medical students, faculty, and kind of different people with different insights. So, one thing that's very important is never apply just to apply. Like, I understand, like, I never felt ready to, like, fully ready to apply, but I felt somewhat ready. That's what you want to feel. Like, you want to feel somewhat prepared, somewhat ready to kind of spend a whole year going through a very, very tedious and kind of soul-sucking kind of process. Like, it's like you gotta take your MCAT, you gotta apply for a bunch of schools, you gotta write so many pages. I think I have like 200 pages of essay from just the app cycle. And but you want to make sure you feel somewhat ready, and don't just apply because you just want to shoot your shot. You rather have one good try rather than multiple tries. Okay, that's very important, and you save a bunch of money too. Like, trust me, the app cycle is very expensive, and if, as I mentioned, the fee assistance program, very useful. Like, if I would apply for it and just see if you get qualified for it because it covers so many things. Like I never paid for a secondary for any of the schools, like MD or DO. I think I just paid for like one secondary for a DO school, which they refunded me after my interview. So I never paid for a secondary, which is very nice. I would take up on that opportunity if you're able to. And so whenever you're kind of like, let's say I was in my junior year of college and I was like, okay, am I ready to apply? I kind of like looked at my hours that I have for, volunteering for leadership, for clinicals, for kind of research. Do I have any presentations? Do I have anything interesting, any hobbies and all that? When I kind of looked at everything, I was like, okay, there's not much gaps. And one thing I didn't include in my applications was a hobby, which was a gap in my kind of application because I didn't have enough spots. Because on AMCAS, the application you use to submit for MD schools, you can only add up to 15 kind of input for activities. So I just ran out of space and I was like, okay, am I gonna get rid of the volunteering opportunity or a hobby? I was like, I'm gonna get rid of the hobby. I'll talk about the hobby during the interview or during the secondaries if there's a time for it. And I looked at that and I was like, okay, there's no gaps on the basic stuff. And then I looked at my stats and my MCAT score. After I got my MCAT score, I bought the MSAR, the medical school. What does it stand for? I don't remember what it stands for anymore. But MSAR basically is a data, it's like a glorified Google sheet of practically so much data point for med schools. So it's like they got the average GPA, the average MCAT score, the median MCAT score of every single med school, the MD med schools. And the DOs have a kind of an equivalent, which is called the DO Explorer, and that has all that stuff too. So I use those two, and I would like filter based on my MCAT score, based on my GPA. Am I going to be a competitive applicant at these schools? And the way I approached it, it was like on MSAR, you can look at the kind of percentile of their MCAT scores and GPAs. And I looked if I fall within the 25th till the 75th percentile of the MCAT score. And that's how I pretty much chose my kind of schools that I'm going to apply to. And then one thing I looked at too was like, do they take any out-of-state students? Because if they take zero, there's no point in applying. Like if they explicitly say that we do not take any out-of-state students, like for example, I think there was like North Dakota school that or South Dakota, I don't remember, but they only take like residents within the region or like University of Washington, they only take people from, Alaska, Washington, Montana, Idaho, and all that just within that proximity. So there was no point in me applying. And when I made sure I pay attention to all those details, and they're all available on MSAR. And based on all that information, I kind of put everything in a Google sheet. I was like, okay, this is the school I want to apply to. This is their GPA, this is their MCAT, and they accept out of state. And I also applied, as I said, to both ND and DOs. So I did the same process with the DO schools. I went in, looked at their MCAT score. There's not that many out of state, um, there's not that many DO schools that don't take out of state students. So that was really not a huge concern on that end. Um, so when I made that list, I was like, okay, now I have a bunch of schools. How am I going to narrow it down? So in my first wave of application, I applied to, I think it was 30 MD schools and 15 DO schools. And when I kind of submitted all the secondaries and it was August, September, I was like, okay, maybe I should apply to some more. Like, okay. And I was like, let's go back to our Google sheet. And I applied to like 20 bunch more of MD schools and like 10 more DO schools. So I applied to a lot of schools, like a lot, like 80 something. And that was very excessive amount, and I applied to schools that I wouldn't even go to. So I recommend you apply to schools that you would take and places you would live at. Like I applied to states like I would never live in. I just applied because I was so scared of not getting in. And that's a very valid kind of concern to have when you are like applying for this field and kind of how uncertain it is. But trust me, if you do practically most of the things right, like you get a decent GPA, decent MCAT score, which is within the range for that school, you do you do all the boxes. I don't want to call them boxes, but like if you kind of get good experiences from different aspects of the things that you're looking at, your volunteering, your leadership, your research, your clinical hours, if you get all that, then you're pretty set. Um, so after that, I was like, okay, now I applied to a bunch of schools. And when end of September, October came, I was getting like a bunch of emails like, okay, I gotta sign up for interviews. I gotta sign up for interviews. I was like, okay, I did not expect this. So I was like very pleasant surprise. And it was a very like a nice confidence booster because I was like, okay, I'm like actually getting interviews and I'm like getting one step closer to kind of achieving that dream of becoming a physician. And I was like, okay, now I can't mess this up, right? So that's when I kind of turned to interview prep and I spent time kind of doing mock interviews and kind of reading over ethical scenarios and kind of learning about the school and kind of get a good idea about the profession and what questions they might ask. So the best things to do for interview prep is like sit down with someone. If you have your pre-health office, use them. If you have a friend, like a med student, anyone that you know, it'll be more than helpful. Like a physician, like just getting the experience of talking to someone about like questions that you've never heard before is like you can't beat that because they can give feedback on the words you say and also your body language. So body language is a very kind of important aspect of interviews that everyone should keep in mind because like your words can say a different thing, but your body language is saying complete opposite. And you need to be conscious about that because if you're not, then um you're giving off the wrong message and that is a red flag, right? So make sure you learn about your body language and kind of see how people interpret it, like how they look at it and what it makes like how does it make them feel and kind of take that advice. Like it's very important. And that's like one of the biggest things I've seen like from just doing a bunch of interviews. Like body language says a lot and they really look out for it. And just get good with your timing, like have a very good answer for why medicine because practically every interview is going to ask you that. Have a very good answer for why this school. Have a good answer for like why not PA, why not NP, why not nurse, why not other professions, and have a kind of a general understanding about your activities because I feel like sometimes I was like, okay, what did I do back then? So like I would go back and read up my application and before every interview, I would just practically go back to my MCAS and review like majority of things I put in there. So I have a refresher of like, okay, what did I actually say and like what I actually did during this time. So I have a very good idea of what went down and I won't just blank on the spot because I don't remember something. And for interviews, like if you prep well enough, you'll be able to do more than fine. And one thing I skipped over is the networking and apply on time. So applying on time. So as I said, like you don't need to get everything in the first day. Like there's nowhere that says that. There's no data that proves, oh, if you apply on this first day, you're gonna get it. The best thing to do, like a general rule of thumb that kind of I've seen over kind of past year and the other match teams I've talked to as long as you get everything in before kind of Labor Day of that app cycle, you're gonna be fine. Like as long as you don't miss any major deadline, like if a school sends an application to you and they're like, okay, the deadline's within the next 2 weeks and you miss that, okay, that's not okay, right? So you look at the deadlines, but practically most schools don't have a hard cutoff. If they don't have a hard cutoff, before Labor Day is a very good kind of general rule of thumb because they're still gonna have plenty of interview spots left because schools interview in August, September, October, November, some in December, and a bunch other in January, February, and March. And April is when the kind of the interview season dies off because now they have filled up their actual seats for the class and they've put people on wait list. And in April is when people kind of drop their seats and then the schools take people from the wait list. And May is when you have to actually commit to a school. And so just try to get everything in before Labor Day. Just have that as your hard cutoff if the school doesn't give you a deadline. But the sooner the better. But if you're gonna panic about the timeline, don't. There's no need to. Like I applied to schools like before Labor Day, like during that week, and I was more than fine. Like most of my success came from that batch of applications than the ones I submit on the day one. And for letter of recommendations, like whenever you're gonna ask a mentor, a faculty, a professor, anyone, a physician, you should really emphasize, like you should really ask this question, like, does this person know you well enough? Can they talk about unique things about you? And can they write a strong letter of recommendation? So I always ask the person, like, can you write me a strong letter of recommendation? Because for med school, letter of recommendation can make or break your application. Because if it's like super generic, like, oh, like Arad was really good at doing this, and he got like an A+ in my class. He's so good. Like that is not good enough. You need to like have them talk about your unique skills, how you work in a team, just depending on what the scenario is, right? So like a physician, they want to kind of hear that, okay, you're compassionate, you're empathetic, you can work in a group, you're open to criticism, you are able to critically think about things. So it's very important that you are able to articulate that to the letter writer because that way you can kind of get an excellent letter of recommendation. And as I said, so I sent them my personal statement, my CV, my grades, so unofficial transcripts, and in the letter I offered if they need any additional information, I'll give it to them. And I also let them know I'll be using Interfolio to restore my to store my kind of letter of recommendation so I can use them for both MD and DO schools without having to bother the letter writer again to submit it to a different platform. Um, let's see. That is like kind of the basic overall tips that I have for kind of this journey and all that. And I was just gonna leave some time for questions. You don't have any questions?
Yeah, we have some questions here. The first question is, what classes did you take before studying for the MCAT?
So the basic like sciences. So I had my Bio 1, Bio 2. I took microbiology in community college. I had my general chemistries, OChem. I basically had every prereq done before MCAT. The only thing that I hadn't done yet was biochem, which I felt just, using Khan Academy. And another resource I used that I didn't mention was the Med School Coach YouTube videos. So they have a YouTube channel with just like subjects divided by like biochem, OChem, all that. So I used that as a study tool, and it really helped me kind of get the overall understanding and kind of get the things that I need to know for MCAT. So I feel like as long as you've taken the general kind of prereqs for most med schools, which is like the two biology, the two general chem, the two OChem, the physics, and the math and some biochem, you're more than fine.
I have a question myself. So when asking for when you're applying for MD and DO schools, did you tell your letter writers to specifically say like oh, a route is applying to MD school or a DO school, or how did you approach that to make it like more broad that you're just applying to MD or DO?
For sure. Yeah. So the way I phrase it, like I let the letter writers know that I'm just applying to medical school because DOs and MDs, they're medical schools, like in general. Like if you say dear like admission committee, like that's more than enough. That's what I asked them to put. So I was like, in the heading, if you don't mind just putting dear admission committee or to whom it may like concern and all that, just keeping it general. That's what I told them. I was like, I might be applying to both MD and DO. Just some, I just didn't even tell them I'm doing MD and DO. I just told them I'm just doing med school, and they just put that. So just if the person asks, like, are you applying MD or DO? Just be like, I'm applying to both. Could you please just keep it general? Just dear admission committee. That's more than enough.
All right, sounds good. Thanks.
Of course.
Our next question is, did you ever feel overwhelmed? And if so, what kept you going?
Oh, for sure. Like every step of the journey, there's just like you hit those roadblocks and you're like, oh man, like I can't keep going. But the thing is, like anything in life is you're gonna hit the roadblocks, right? But medicine just got so many other roadblocks because there's so many things that you gotta do. And sometimes like, did I actually do all that? Like it's insane. Like now looking back at like all the pre-med stuff like that, it was like, oh yeah, I was crazy, like I can't do that now. But then like probably when I'm resident, like look at med school, like, oh, I did all that. I'm crazy. So like when you're at that moment, when you hit that roadblock, like you feel like you want to give up, but you always got to remember, like, how much do I really want this? Like, no one forced you to do medicine. I hope no one did. Like, if you're getting forced into medicine or like any career in general, like, not good. Like, because for me, my motivation comes from within and for my passion for this field and for the hopes of wanting to give back and kind of commitment to service. And if I didn't have that, honestly, like I would just give up. Like when I was like in my first biology class, like if you don't have that passion, if you don't build that passion and commitment and discipline for what you really want, you're just gonna become overwhelmed and kind of take a step back and kind of give up. But the way I did it, whenever I hit a roadblock, I was like, okay, I really want this. It's very challenging, but I'm going to push through. How am I going to do this? I'm going to ask for advice or look at it from a different perspective. So I would reach out to mentors, so either physicians, even faculty, or just anyone in the school or anyone in life that would be able to kind of give insight about what I'm going through. So let's say, okay, I'm really like giving up on finding research. What am I gonna do? Okay, so let's kind of first look up things, like if you have good old ChatGPT, if you have Google and all that stuff now. So you ask things, okay, you look at things from a different perspective and you kind of come up with somewhat a solution, or you find who you're going to ask. Okay, I'm going to email an advisor. Hopefully, they know a research person, or they're going to refer me to someone better. So, just by taking kind of a step back and looking at things from a different angle and kind of coming up with different solutions and reminding yourself of how much you're kind of interested and invested in this field or whatever career you're pursuing. It doesn't have to be medicine. Like as long as you have the passion and kind of the drive for it, you're gonna be more than fine. Like you're gonna push through and all that. But it's the matter of like building the skills that you need to kind of get over that roadblock, which is always, take a step back, don't give up. Look at it from a different perspective, see who I can reach out to, like who might know, or just, take a little break. Sometimes I was like, okay, I'm actually burnt out. What am I gonna do? I'm just gonna I'm just gonna take a break. I'm gonna take 1 week off, like especially like during the school breaks. That was like my like perfect time. I was like, okay, I'm not gonna do anything. I'm gonna take everything off and I'm just gonna recharge. And that way, that's how I kind of dealt with the burnout. Like because like let's be honest, especially with everything's now like that goes on now, like you gotta burn out. Like you have to face it. But just being prepared enough that, okay, I'm gonna use these resources, I'm gonna take some time off, when you plan for it, it's way more manageable than when it just happens and you're kind of in the middle of it now and you have nowhere to go.
All right. Our next question is, do you have Anki card decks also from like previous like University of Arizona med students, or did you have to make your own cards? Like similar to like the MCAT where there's like online resources. Do
Mhm.
your like previous like your peers help you guys, or is this do you now just make your own Anki cards to study?
Yeah, so we get cards handed down from our upperclassmen. So the way kind of I'm approaching it, there's this one general like Anki deck that is called the Unking, and it's like so fancy. Like it has its own website. You can sync it with like your Anki app. You can sign into it. There's so many things, and there's a bunch of resources on there. So, what our kind of upper class students have done, they've kind of labeled the cards that are on there based on our lectures. So, you can do like because that Anking is like apparently gold for step studying. So they have labeled that based on our school material, and they also added the missing stuff. So they've done so much for us. And we also have it's not related to Anki, but based on every lecture, we have this kind of spreadsheet that's been going on that we put, okay, like there are third-party resources like Boards and Beyond, boot camp. These are like think about it as like Khan Academy for med school. Like they're your prep material for STEP. So they have all that information for us, and I can, if I don't want to watch my school lecture, I'll watch those things. And then OnKing already has tags, so cards based on those videos. So I do it like that.
That's so cool. It's a lot easier to like there's a lot of time I think that gets put into making like flashcards and then studying it afterwards. So that's really great.
For sure.
Our next question is what did taking on research mean and what did that look for you in your first year at ASU?
Um, for me, I was like, I had never done research. I mean, never actually done actual research that wasn't beyond the classroom paper. And I was like, okay, it's a new thing to me. And I was very upfront about it. I was like, these are the labs I've done. Like, I talked about my laboratory experiences, like in general biology and microbiology, and like the skills I have. And I was upfront. I was like, I've never actually done any research. So I'm just here to learn. And I have, open perspective and I'm not sure what I'm getting myself into. So I was very upfront about that, and I was very glad that I did it because you want to set realistic expectations from both your end and their end because like you don't want to be like, oh, I know everything. Because let's be honest, if you haven't done something before, you don't know everything. So when I kind of put those expectations and was able to be realistic with myself and with them, we were able to kind of create a very good learning environment for me and for kind of put the foundation for the research. So I was like initially reading up on things to kind of get a background about what the research is, what I'm trying to do, kind of brush up on the basic stuff and kind of easily kind of transition to laboratory stuff. Like, okay, now I'm going to do experiments. For me, just being able to kind of, okay, I read this paper online. Now I'm going to go into the lab and I'm going to kind of mimic the same thing, but with the bacteria I have. I found it very super, like that was the coolest thing I've ever done back then. I was like, this is cool. So I really enjoyed it. So if you're a person who's like very curious, who likes to do new things or just likes to apply things, research, especially basic science is going to be like the best. It's something I recommend for everyone to experience because you either know you hate it or you love it the first week. Like it's something that's very unique. So that's why I brought up like clinical research because if bench research or basic science research is not your thing, that is okay. Like I know so many people who just hate it. Um, if that's not gonna work for you, there are other modalities of research. You can if you know how to code, you can code the things for research. If you like to read things, you can do like meta-analysis, read a bunch of paper, and kind of come up with analysis of those, right? So, or you can administer tests, you can look at surgical interventions and all that. And then we would kind of talk about those information and make up a kind of a research proposal or a paper. So for research, just having an open mind of like, okay, I'm gonna go in, set realistic expectations, be able to kind of learn things and be able to take kind of uh criticism and kind of get better and develop my own kind of thought process because research is all about thinking and being able to apply things you do even for clinical, right? So as long as you kind of work on building those skills, that's gonna be the like the best thing you can do for research.
Does working as a hospital transporter count as clinical experience?
Oh yeah, it was like very clinical because like I'm moving patients around the hospital, I'm helping them. So a lot of times I was like transporting ICU patients or surgery patients, and I would be like, you would be like kind of in charge of, okay, we're taking this and the patient's on a ventilator or any like they're on a bunch of IV stuff, they have a pump going on. So you would be kind of because you're the one that's moving this thing, and you need to kind of synchronize a team that's like, okay, one's pushing the ventilator, one's pushing the IV pole. So you become like a very good leader of kind of like, okay, we're gonna do this right now. We're gonna go to the elevator, we're gonna do this. So and then you're like, okay, now you're gonna like for me, they allowed us to like hook up the patients to the monitors, or if their IV was kind of messed up, we could like help fix them. We wouldn't like administer medication, but if something was going on, we were able to somewhat help. And then kind of transport the patients from the bed to the surgical table or from the bed to the CT scan table and all that. It was very clinical because like you really get to experience things that you wouldn't see otherwise. Like these are the back end of things that it's very good to know. Like it's first of all, like it builds a solid foundation for what medicine is and just gives you an overall kind of a perspective to, okay, it's very humbling and it's very important that you are able to connect with different people within the healthcare team. Because when you become a physician, you're a leader and you need to be able to know where your kind of teammates are coming from and what a better way than kind of actually working in a hospital in those different positions, right?
Our next question is, during the application process, what types of medical experiences would be the most valuable to include?
So anything is perfect. Like as long as you've found something valuable from that experience, you learned something, that is the most important thing. Like as long as you put at least 10 hours in or like 30 hours in, I would include it. But if you're able to write well about it and not just like make up things, that's when you know you have a good thing going on. So for me, I think, scribing, being a medical assistant, being transporter, being a, I don't know, some people do EMT, some people do the EMT and join an EMS group, or they become emergency room techs. Those are all very valuable experiences, but like there's no one size fits all, right? So whatever you find kind of accessible to you because for me, I didn't have the time to do an EMT course, even though it looked cool, I just didn't have time for it. So I found the things that were accessible to me and I spend my time doing that. So don't try to find the pitch perfect clinical experience because there's none that is like that's going to fit that criteria. Do what's realistic for you and what you will learn the most from.
It's also your personality too. If you, yeah, emergency room is really cool, but if you don't do well in the stressful situation, or probably would be a terrible experience, or working in hospice, that may not be something that you really enjoy doing. And, so I think it's just more about your personality. And they have this thing about, like your personality chooses what you're interested in. And I think it has to do with your specialty too. So yeah, it's more important than anything else is what you enjoy doing and what you can talk about it and write about it and you know and basically be able to tell stories. Um, so there's not one thing, there's many things. Obviously, like Arad said that he didn't like scribing, which that was not for him, but other people rave about scribing. So I think everybody has a different folks for no different strokes for different folks. I think that's the saying. So it just depends what you enjoy doing.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like you can see that in medicine, like as he said, like different specialties, they have different personality types. And I feel like that's one of the biggest kind of determinants of what specialty one person does. Like, do you fit the stereotype? Even like I don't want to stereotype, but like that's what it is. Like, do you fit the personality stuff?
All right, our next question. This student is she took or they took Chem 1 and Chem 2 at their college, and they're wondering if they should take higher levels so they can do better on the MCAT.
Um, okay. So I feel like a lot of things I did during like the prereq stuff, I didn't retain much of it, if I'm being honest, especially like during COVID. So when I was studying for the MCAT, I was studying everything again. So as long as you build a good foundation, somewhere like you know the basics, like you know what a molecule is, what an acid, a base is, that if that's what you got from like Chem 1 and 2 and you're able to use that to kind of further your foundation using the resources for MCAT, that's more like that's way more than what you need. As long as you hit all the prereqs, like you have taken the Gen Chem 1, Gen Chem 2, OChem, Organic Chemistry 1 and Organic Chemistry 2. So that way you're kind of have a foundation at least to build up on for the MCAT study. There's no course, like there's no further course that you would do that helps for the MCAT because MCAT is just so much content that you just have to spend time on your own and just kind of learn things as you do practice questions, as you like find out how you learn, because that's an adjustment period for yourself.
All right, our next question is regarding your letter writers. I'm assuming they're asking about like which kinds of people you ask for your letters of recommendation.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the most important thing I was like, have I worked with this person enough to know about my qualities, and will this letter be meaningful? But there's also a general guideline that you want to have. I made sure I have two science. Uh, okay, sorry, give me one sec. So there is. Give me one second. My apologies. So, the overall guideline that I used, so I would have two science letter of recommendation. I would have one humanities or non-science letter of recommendation. So these are coming from professors. And I would have at least one physician letter because I've noticed that DO schools and some MD schools require one physician letter at the very least. And I make sure I have that. And then I would also find one from a leadership position or a volunteering position that kind of would talk about that aspect of my work ethic and my personality. So the general guideline, you want that five letter, right? So the two sciences, one non-science, one clinical, and that clinical better, like it's best that it comes from a physician or your leadership comes from a physician. It's fine. Like that was my case. Like I had two science letters, I had one or two non-science. I had a bunch from like mentors and kind of leadership positions I had. And the people who ran that position or were mentoring me for it, I asked them for it. And then I got one from Pre-Med CC. And so that I tried to kind of have everything in. And then I had one from a shadowing opportunity. And that was pretty much it. Like as long as you have the minimum the schools ask for, that's all. Like that five letter rule is going to be applicable to the 99% of med schools in my experience.
Our next question is, if you're comfortable sharing, what were your stats, like your GPA, your MCAT, and clinical hours?
Yeah, of course. So let's go from the stats. So I don't actually remember what my GPA was exactly, but I think it was like 3.9 or 3.85, something along the lines. I feel like as long as like your GPA is above the average for the school, you're fine for that school, or even above the 25th percentile, or like let's say you did the specialized master program and all that. And for MCAT, I got a 511. My car score was the worst thing on this planet. It was 123. That was my biggest kind of gap in my application. I just couldn't like read. So that was my downfall. For clinical hours, I won't say I had a lot because I worked for like a year and a half. I was volunteering for 2 years. I had like at least 2,000 or 2,500. And it was a lot of time, like hours spent because I was just working and it was my job. And for leadership, I had a lot of leadership opportunities. Like I probably had like 800-ish, maybe 1,000 pushing it. And volunteering, it was like solid 200, 150. Research, that was like 2 years of full-time, not full-time going to the lab, but like at least spending 10 hours or 15 hours a week just being in the lab. So that was another like 1,000, I would say. So they sound a lot, but if you kind of continuously do a thing that you're passionate about and you care about, it's gonna rack up. Like for me, my clinical experience was my job. I was like making money and I was also getting experience and I was enjoying it, you know? It was like you you hit two birds with one stone? Yeah, that's what I did. And then for my research, I enjoyed what I was doing. I also got academic credits for my research. So I was like getting 3 credits for each semester for just doing research. And I was like, okay, this is nice, you know. So like I fill some classes in with that research opportunity and also get to fulfill hours, right? And then volunteering, I did it like once in a while for like 3 years or 2 years and a half. And like once a month, maybe twice a month. And sometimes I would just like rack up a lot during one month. So when I knew I was going to be super busy during a certain period of time, I would have like enough time to kind of spread it out during that one year. So if you plan everything like that, it's going to work more than perfect. Like I think the best combo is just you do a clinical job or yeah, you do clinical job or you do a research job. And then if you do research job, you do like clinical volunteering on the side. If you do your clinical job, you do research volunteering on the side, right? And then you just sprinkle in some volunteering on the things you're passionate about, and you take up on some leadership things you're interested in, and that you got the combo. And as long as you're kind of making meaningful impact and learning things and you're able to write about them and talk about them, you're golden. That is the secret sauce, I would say.
Our next question is, what should we consider before deciding between MD and DO?
Okay, so at the end of the day, they're both physicians. Like, there's no difference. The only thing that is different is the kind of the curriculum that DO students go through. They have the typical sciences that an MD or MD student does. So they learn the medicine, but they also have this osteopathic principles and osteopathic manipulative medicine that they learn about, which I'm pretty sure a lot of kind of DOs don't actually use anymore, or they only use the ones they find valuable. So you learn about these things. You also get tested on them on your board exams. And you learn like it's just extra things you have to do for med school. Like that is the biggest difference for MD and DO. That you just have to do a little bit of extra. If you're passionate about those things, that is like perfect for you. Like you're gonna learn about the holistic approaches to medicine. You're able to kind of learn about the mind, body, spirit stuff. You're able to learn about some manipulative medicine. You're able to kind of assist your patients with. And I would say the biggest hurdle is that so for the residency programs, and a few years ago, they were combined. It used to be that DOs had their own residency programs and MDs had their own, but they got merged. So now a lot of residency programs want you to take STEP as well. So let's say if you want to do something very competitive, specialty wise, let's say orthopedic surgery, they expect you to take the steps as well. So like you have COMLEX, which are the board exams that you need to take. So you have COMLEX 1, you have COMLEX 2, and you have COMLEX 3. You take COMLEX 3 in residency. COMLEX 1 is right after your second year of med school. COMLEX 2 is like early in your fourth year. And then for kind of MD side, you have the step. So you step one, you have which you take right after your second year. You have step two, which you take end of third or beginning of fourth year, and you have step three, which you take during residency. So if you go to a DO school and you want to do something competitive, they expect you to take both your COMLEX because you need them to be a certified DO physician, but they also expect you to take that step. So do you have extra kind of time that you have to dedicate to studying for step and kind of is extra money that you got to pay for too because these board exams are kind of expensive, like at least 1,000 to kind of sign up for them and then a bunch more to pay for prep material. So there is like no actual difference on what a DO or MD does. It's just the path that you get there is a little bit different and some might have more setbacks than others.
Our next question is what?
The only thing
Oh, go
that I
ahead,
would
guys.
add is um do not put in your DO application or anywhere that say that DO is easier because that's actually like a really good way. Now, people say DO is easier to get in, which that's debatable. The only I would say the major difference between DO and MD is you could get into a DO school with lower numbers in terms of GPA and MCAT. Although, like if you want to go to California or one of the uh like California DO schools, um GPA and MCAT are pretty comparable. But also most DO schools require to have a DO letter, a recommendation, and you have to understand what osteopathic medicine is. And they will ask you in their essay, they will ask you in the interview. So it's a pretty comparable thing. So I would just throw that out there to say that it's not easier, but it's also so but you have to know what you want to do. We've had a bunch of DO schools and speakers here and so people shared a lot of those experiences as well. But in terms of clinically, in 50 states, you pretty much do every single thing an MD does, a DO can do. And the only difference is DO, if you choose to do in your practice, you could do manipulative medicine, and you should research what that is because it works for some people. And the other part of it too, it's not the same thing as chiropractic. So don't ever say to a DO, so you're just like a chiropractor, and that's definitely not true. A DO can give you narcotics and do all that good stuff. There's DO that are surgeons. I actually worked with a DO who's a neurosurgeon, so there.
Perfect.
Our, our next question is what additional challenges do you face by being an immigrant applying to med school?
I feel like just getting to the point of applying is very it's such a big accomplishment, especially like for me, I was like, okay, when I applied, I had just moved to the US 5 years ago. Like prior to that, I was like, okay, this is crazy, being able to figure everything out. But I feel like it puts you at an advantage because you've had very unique experiences they can talk about. Like for me, I lived alone for a certain amount of years when I was like 16. That's a very kind of useful thing, useful experience, and it's very unique as well, right? So I felt like it helped me more than it kind of challenged me. Sure, there were like days when I first came in, I was like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I want to go back. There's so many different things that are kind of not going my way. But when I kind of learned about, okay, I can use this to my advantage. I have a unique background. I'm able to look at things from a different perspective. I'm more resilient now because of those past experiences. I'm more disciplined, I'm more driven just because of those experiences I had as an immigrant, and I'm more grateful for being able to kind of achieve the next level whenever I'm kind of moving up the ladder. So just it made me become more kind of conscious about what is going on, being more grateful and being more kind of um, more living in the moment and kind of appreciating things. So sure, there were barriers like language. So when I first came in, I didn't know much English, so I had to kind of learn English in high school. It was a very huge challenge, but I enjoyed it because now I was able to kind of converse with people. I'm now able to be a, functional person in a society. I'm able to work. I'm able to effectively attend my classes and kind of pursue a dream that I've always had. So, when I was like looking at it that way, I was like, sure, there were a lot of hard things that I had to do. I hadn't seen my family for a long time. I was disconnected from my community, but I was able to kind of find my own community and build a new thing when I moved here, right? So like there's you're able to kind of adapt and become more resilient, and this kind of drives you further. And that's one thing I really learned about. And at first I was like, okay, I'm just gonna do things like day at a time. And then when I like kind of look back, I was like, okay, this is very kind of I'm becoming more resilient, becoming more grateful, and you kind of look at life from a different perspective, which I really appreciated. And especially like during interviews and the med schools like app cycle and all that, it was something that was really highlighted when I was like talking to the admission committees or the people that were interviewing. That was an attribute they appreciated. So it really like you have to go through more hurdles, you have to go through more challenges, but at the end it kind of pays off to your favor. You become more resilient, more you're able to relate to more things and you're more unique. So I felt like that was very kind of helpful, and I'm very grateful to be where I am and being an immigrant, like the best thing happened to me.
Do you have any advice on how to better communicate with others?
Um, the first and foremost thing that for communication for me is like I try to be direct because I feel like when you're able to get your point across and be direct with things, you're gonna be way better at communicating. Like don't try to like twist your words or make things not direct. So like if like okay, let's talk about like you're asking for a letter. Don't like try to build up to it. Just be upfront like, okay, I'm going to ask you for a letter of recommendation. Are you able to do it or not? Like, don't ask like, oh, do you have free time right now? Do you have this? Like being more direct because especially when you're busy and other people are busy, being direct will go a long way. Like that is, I think, the best communication skill that one person can might have. Be direct, but also be polite about it. Like read the room. I think that's the biggest thing. Like read the room, be able to kind of think about it. Okay, is this the right time to talk? Is this the right time to communicate? Is this the right time to say a thing? And if it is, then be direct about it and also professional and polite. Because these three rules are going to carry along like a long way. And these are like the things they also teach us in med school when we're communicating with patients, you know? You don't want to kind of give a different meaning when you're talking. Like you don't want to come off wrong. So that's why you're direct and professional at the same time.
Yeah, and the only thing that I would add is you don't become a better communicator by sitting in your room playing video games or um, watching TikTok. You actually like have to go and do it. Why does medical school want you to volunteer and do community service and do all those things? Is because you have to be out in public and with people and all these different things. And so you have to be very comfortable to communicate because as a physician, you literally walk into someone's room within probably 2 minutes, you're asking him very, not probably even faster than that, probably 30 seconds. You're asking him very uncomfortable questions and probably place your hands in very uncomfortable areas. And so if you can't, if you don't have that ability to do that, you will not be a very good clinician and it will come out in your interviews and all those different things. And so that's why they say being involved in leadership and student clubs, community service, all of those things that are required. It's not because they want you to It's not that, there's a reason for that. If they wanted people to be really good studiers, then probably they wouldn't want you to do all those things. And so that's why you're required to do that. And I think being involved in your community, being involved at school, there's student government, student groups, student clubs. And if you're one of those people that doesn't like hanging around pre-meds, there's hundreds of things you could do not to be hanging around pre-meds. Also, working on a political campaign, you know, like knocking on doors and all of those things are, that's how you learn how to communicate. So, and it's hard. It's If it was easy, then everybody would do it. And so, and it's being, what is it? Is to be, there's a quote, being comfortable with being uncomfortable. So, and I think that's why all of these things are out there. It's not to torture you, but to actually make you better.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It makes you more well-rounded. And funny thing you brought up political campaigns. Like one thing I did, I was like a petition circulator. So it was like I was the one, I was that guy that was like on the, libraries or like public campuses. I was like talk to random people and try to get them to sign a legislative. So that like doing that, I was like, I'm not afraid to do anything in this world because you're just approaching the most random people at the most random time of their day with the most random thing, you know? So like nothing can beat that. And that just makes you like, I'm not scared to talk to no one. Like after that, I was like, oh, yeah, easy money, you know?
Yeah, in the olden days, they used to call them door-to-door salesmen. You had to go to like knock on people's doors and sell
Mhm.
stuff. I mean, not that doesn't really, but yeah, there's still people that do it, and I would think that would be like the most uncomfortable thing. I know when I came to the States, the most uncomfortable thing I had to do was sell, I think it was cookies or something for something that I was involved with, and man, my English was just terrible. And I think, Arad would tell you this is that the dude's only, how long have you been here? 6 years? Yeah,
Yes.
and us, as immigrants, we called ourselves fresh off the boat. And um he had to learn a language and learn how to communicate. And I didn't know that you did the whole circular petition thing, because that's a pretty hard thing. Like somebody's like rushing into the grocery store. And it was paid, right? Or was it volunteer?
I first started at volunteer and then I got paid.
Yeah, I know in California you can make like $5 a signature for some initiatives.
Yeah.
So it's worth it. Like you could like I've personally never done that, but I've done like political campaigns and I've done a lot of the door-to-door knocking and stuff. And so yeah, be comfortable with being uncomfortable. If you're a shy person and you don't, communicate, like it's really needed on even on your standard patients, that can be pretty stressful. But on real patients is even worse. It's more stressful. On top of like knowing all the medicine and knowing all the things you're supposed to ask, if it's not a second nature to you, then it's going to be really hard.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's not about just like practicing medicine, but you actually know you're supposed to articulate medicine. You're supposed to ask questions to kind of get you down to the sciences. And that's like one thing they're teaching us. Like you have a doctoring course, which is like we talk to standardized patients and we interview them. We do physical exams, and we're supposed to follow a certain guideline that's like, okay, we're not leading questions, we're not stacking questions, we're not confusing patients, we're being respectful, we're being trauma informed. So like there's so many things to take into consideration for like just a medical interview, like when you're actually interviewing patients. So like there's so many different aspects that go in, and the more experience you have just talking to people, the better you're going to be at adapting to what they're asking you to do.
So I know it's like 6:32, and I just want to make sure, Arad, is if it's okay for us to keep asking questions.
Yeah, you keep going.
All right. So our next one is, what type of research project would be the most beneficial to include in an application?
So as I said, like anything on the application, there's no one size fits all, right? So whatever you find valuable and you're accessible to it, your personality matches, you have the opportunity and you actually find it interesting, that is the one to go to. Whether it's basic science about a random nanorobot or anything, or you're delivering cancer drugs, or you're learning about the if this particular orthopedic surgery on rear deltoid is going to make it better, right? So whatever you find valuable, and a lot of times we research like what you're able to kind of grab onto, because research for me was the hardest thing to find throughout the whole thing. I found finding shadowing easier than research for some reason. But when you like find something and you find it interesting and valuable, just stick to it. And because research is something you have to do in a long period of time for it to actually produce something. And getting a publication or a poster or at least something to show that you were productive during your research time is valuable. Like I feel like doing 6 months of research and being able to produce like kind of a poster, a publication, an abstract is very valuable because it shows that you're like actively working on something. It's like you're kind of making results rather than just working on a stagnant project for a year and you have nothing to show for, and everything you talk about is just the basic science and nothing above the application. So just pick on one thing that's accessible to you. You're able to commit to it, and there's some hopes for kind of research productivity, also known as posters or publications.
So this student has been having trouble finding shadowing opportunities, like you mentioned, and they haven't had that much success so far. They're asking if you have any advice on how they should approach doctors or improve their chances of getting a shadowing opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like as soon as I started medical school, because like shadowing people have become so much easier. As soon as you say like I'm a med student, like you're in. But the way I found shadowing, so I kind of reached out to pre-med clubs in my university or just advisors and asked them if they have any contacts. Because your school usually has somewhat of a contact, or even if your school has like a campus health and they have a doctor, they're like you can ask to shadow them, right? So that is very valuable. Like try to use your resources. That is the most important thing that you can do in this, like that is the most useful thing you can do in this whole process. So for me, the way it worked, I reached out to an advisor. I was like, do you have any shadowing opportunities I can kind of connect to? They're like, yeah, we have this list of physicians, you can call their office. So I would just call, 50 offices a day, and I was like, hey, I'm a pre-med student. I'm trying to get more exposure to this field. I'm very interested in your specialty. And am I able to come and shadow for a day or two? And shadowing doesn't need to be like 80 hours. Like you just get a couple shifts and get a good idea of what the physician does. And that's pretty much all you need. Like try to diversify your like specialties. Like, okay, I want to do family medicine. Okay, I'll look at that. I'll look at surgery. I'll look at oncology. But a lot of times you don't have that option. Just do whatever is accessible. But I found just calling the offices from like, and also getting the contacts from an advisor was the most kind of productive way of going about finding shadowing. And I had like I shadowed 4 doctors or 5 doctors. And also if you have a job at a kind of hospital and you have your hospital email, if you reach out to the doctors with the hospital email, there's a higher chance of them like allowing you to shadow them from personal experience than just like emailing from your random university email. And then and if they see your work there, that's like you're kind of in. Like you're like you're a foot in the door, you're like, okay, I'm like almost there. And they know you've met all the credentialing, all the immunization, because that's one of the biggest things. They don't want to risk their patients getting exposed to anything. So if you're already like volunteering or you're a worker in a hospital, reach out to the doctors within that hospital because you'll have more success in that sense.
Yeah, we did a whole workshop. It's like an hour and a half long to like 2 hours long about how to get clinical experience. The problem is certain states like California is really, really tough to get into a hospital. And so there are things you could do. Like patient transport is like I think I think our hospital pays like $25 an hour. and they're always looking for people. Um, the other thing is just quick things you could do. Phlebotomy is like 80 hours. But yeah, if you get into a hospital, there's also a volunteer. And at the end of that presentation, there's this thing you could get to your local hospital, the local doctor's offices in your area, and just write a one-page letter and attach your resume and literally drop it off. Email, like if a doctor's over, a certain age, they're not going to check their email. And a lot of them, like if they have the private offices, you don't have access to their emails. Like big university hospitals, you do, but most of them don't even respond to emails. But if you're in the hospital, and as what Arat said is that like healthcare is the most regulated thing in the U.S. And so it's not just like you're not showing up, like you got to pass through. You got to make sure you have a TB, you have vaccines, you have all of these different things. So it's much harder. But a smaller clinic or smaller doctor's office, you may bypass those things, but you still have to jump through some hoops. And I know another place that's a really good place to get good clinical experience, and Planned Parenthood is another really great place as well. Um, and so yeah, and so it's you got to hustle. It's not like a it's and it like you're gonna have to get used to hearing a lot of no's, because it's a liability. Every time they let somebody in there with them, they have to take that liability. And so um and just look at it this way. If somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, do you want a junior hire to come and shadow you in college? Would you be okay with that?" Kind of put it in that mindset, and you'd be like, "No, like I don't want a junior hire to," and just to shadow me all day in college. Like, what the heck? Like, but that's kind of the same concept if you want to think about it. But anyways.
All right. Our next question is, what factors should I consider when choosing a specialty, and how can you explore different fields to find one that suits you the best?
For specialty, or like it's too early for me to give that advice because like I haven't picked any specialty, still figuring out my on my own. But the biggest thing for me is lifestyle. Like I can't lie, like am I gonna have a decent life when I'm like 50 years old? Am I gonna be like willing to do the same things I'm doing in like my 30s? So looking at kind of the immediate kind of lifestyle and the kind of what am I gonna be like kind of 10 years before retirement. That's one thing I look at. And then one other thing I look at, okay, am I enjoying the work that I'm doing? So if I don't like surgery and I end up doing surgery, then I'm going to be miserable for my entire life. Because you got to remember, like when you do a specialty in medicine, you're basically marrying that specialty for eternity, unless you come back and do another residency, which is so much time. Like it's not worth it. So it's you gotta find your personality and your life goals and your interests compatible with the residency. Like there's not gonna be one very, very, very perfect match for everyone, but there's gonna be one that's kind of falls within your interests. Like for me, like internal medicine is somewhat interesting because it covers practically everything and it's got procedures. You can kind of see patients, you can micromanage lab values. You can practically do anything you want, right? But like surgery, on the other hand, I'm not a very like technical hands-on person, so that's not something I'm very interested about. But I'm still keeping my options open. Maybe I'll do something I was like, oh, this is cool. Maybe I want to do that. So another thing is exposure. So if I've actually never like touched a scalpel before, and or never held a retractor or never been in an OR, I would never know what a surgery lifestyle is or what surgery encompasses. So just getting wide kind of variety of exposures. So in our med school, we have these experiences called capstones. So we get like 1 week to go shadow physicians in different specialties. So that's one way they allow us to explore different specialties. And if the person who asked this, I'm assuming they're still in their pre-med kind of era, don't even worry about your specialty. Like worry about getting to med school first, because even in med school, like every single one of my classmates, they probably changed their mind already twice. Like it just changes every
Twice, more like every week.
yeah, like it's crazy. Like you do a new lecture, like yeah, cool specialty they've never heard about comes in like, oh yeah, I want to do that. And then you learn about it, like, no, I don't want to do that. So if you're like pre-med or like anything prior to med school, even like if you're a first year med student, like you don't really have to know your specialty. Have like somewhat of a general interest, but when you actually get to med school, like you get your exposures, you get to shadow, you get to actually learn about the things within the specialty, that's when you decide.
At this point, don't worry about it. Just know why medicine. I think that's the most important thing.
Like, do you want to be a doctor? That's a real question.
And also just in terms of like experiences, volunteering and stuff, that's a good way to know. But like you don't get to decide what you want to do until the end of your third year of medical school. So
Yep.
and trust me, I know people that wanted to go become pediatricians and they're doing neurosurgery, and then you people that want to be neurosurgeons and are doing pediatrics. So it's
Yep.
All right. Our next question is, would research in a soft science like psychology or sociology be beneficial, or is it more recommended to do research in hard sciences like microbiology or pharmacology?
It really doesn't matter, to be honest. As long as you find the research enjoyable and or if it's the only opportunity you have, I would take it. Like I have classmates who did a master's in psychology just because of the research opportunity, because they were interested in it. And it's a unique thing to them and they enjoyed it. You kind of have your research experience in. That's all that matters. Like don't overthink all these things. Nothing
it's what
has to
you enjoy doing. It's kind of like saying if you don't like looking through a microscope and petri dish, then do psychology and sociology. That's very relevant to medicine.
Yep.
There's this whole field called the social determinant of health. That's all sociology, psychology. So there's this like people that are like experts in that. And so, yeah, I would say it's kind of like the same thing about like what kind of experience should you have? It's like, well, I don't know. If you don't like to be in stressful situation, don't go in the ER. Like, or if you know, or hospice, like if that's, so it's, yeah,
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like if you find the research interesting, like you can't relate everything to medicine. Like I can't go like talk about pollution in the air. That would be my research. That is relevant to medicine. Like
very.
yeah. So like you can relate everything and anything to medicine as long as you're interested about doing it, or if it's the only research opportunity you find. It really doesn't matter.
Yeah, I knew one person who got into medical school who in college did a research project where they went and moved into a under like a I don't know what they're called, like government building, housing building in
Mhm.
Chicago, and lived there for a year and was just the sociology research, and she ended up getting a full ride to Stanford. So it's, medical school. So
There you
there's
go.
hundreds of things you could do that, because even if you're doing sociology or psychology, you're still using the scientific method, and doing a lot of things. So yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Our next question is, after applying to multiple schools, how many did you end up getting accepted to? The student is worried about that part of the process and would appreciate hearing about your experience in terms of like getting acceptances and how you went forward with that.
Absolutely. Give me 1 second. I'll pull up my stuff. I don't remember actually. It's been a long time, like 6 months. Forgot about the process already. But I practically applied to 82 schools. I did a bunch of interviews.
Wow.
So for me, sorry, I'm just trying to open my email. It's been a long time since I logged in my school email. So for me, I've I got a lot of um I was able to get a lot of interviews because I had very unique experiences, like coming here as an immigrant, being able to do all these things that were very important to me, and being able to write about it impactfully. And also, I applied to realistic choices. Like I didn't apply to places that had like 528 MCATs with my 511 MCAT, right? I was realistic with my choices. So the schools I applied to, like that I was a perfect, not a perfect, but like somewhat a decent fit for them, and both from an academic standpoint and also a personal standpoint. But the kind of general basis, I applied to 57 MD schools. I completed 56 secondaries. I got 22 interview invites. I attended 18 of them, and I got 12 acceptances for MD and waitlisted at 5 schools. Um, I didn't get any post-interview rejections for MDs or DOs. For DO, I applied to 24 primaries, 25 secondary. I got 20 interview invites. I only attended like 5 or 7. Yeah, I attended 7, and I was accepted to all of that 7 schools. So it's if you played the numbers game, excuse me, and you apply realistically, you're able to get in. Like make sure you hit that stats, you make sure you check all those boxes, and make sure you have meaningful things to talk about, and then you're in. Like it's gonna work out at the end if you do everything right.
In the application process, do you need to write about each medical experience separately, or will they be included as part of the personal statement?
So it depends how you want to approach your personal statement. So some people do like they throw each paragraph, they do like 6 paragraphs in overall, and they do like one intro, like 4 different paragraphs for 4 different experiences, and the last paragraph conclusion. I did like a coherent kind of story, and I sprinkled in some experiences in there. But you have your whole activity section, which is like 15 boxes of you talking about your experiences, and you have a character count, but you're able to somewhat talk about it meaningfully. And for 3 of those, you're able to add more characters, more like you're able to add an extra paragraph to make it more what do you call it? More meaningful to you and more elaborate.
All right, our next question is, do you think first gen have any type of help or incentives of getting through the entire medical process? Like certain schools offer extra help for first gen students.
Um, it okay, it really depends. So being just first gen by itself is not going to do anything, but it's the experiences that you've had. It's the how did you use that experience being a first gen, and kind of how did it make you the person who you are today? And if you're able to talk about that meaningfully and show about the resilience you've built and all the different skills and characteristics that you've built, it will help you. Because if you can be a more well-rounded person, you're gonna make it so much like uh they're gonna want you, and they also want a well-rounded person. And if you articulate that, you're hitting and checking off all their boxes.
Yeah, I don't know where this individual is, but there's a lot of summer programs. So if you come tomorrow, you'll find out about there's some programs that are summer programs at certain medical schools, and that you could be part of. There's summer besides summer programs. There's also other opportunities that offer. But like I said, I don't know who this person is or where they go to school, so it's kind of really hard to point out which one's which. Um, but some medical schools get 10,000 applications and they can't help everyone, and it's kind of like one of those unfortunate things. Also, your undergraduate school should have resources, but not all undergraduate schools are created the same and have resources and opportunities. So, yeah.
How did you finance your med school?
Um, so I'm doing a scholarship through the University of Arizona. So I'm committing to serve Arizona for a certain amount of years in return of them paying for my medical school. So that is the program I signed up for. But when I was interviewing and everything, some schools offered like actual merit scholarships. So it just depends on like how early you get accepted, how much they want you, and if they have any money. So like U of A, like this past year, they're going through a little bit of a financial hurdle. So they've not had the most amount of money. And even with the service loans and all that, it's very iffy. So it all depends on school. But I would say 90% or 98% of medical students, they either take out loans or they have someone pay off their um school if they have money or parents have money.
There's also National Health Service Corps, there's military, there's hundreds of things.
Yeah.
And I would just tell you that once you're done with medical school, you're not going to be starving. You're going to find a job. You're going to have a job and you're going to be able to pay your loan. So,
Yeah.
going to medicine, there's hundreds of reasons not to do it, but paying for school shouldn't be one of them because unemployment for physician is so low that they don't even track it. And I've never met a homeless doctor. So you're
Yeah.
not going to make money as much as a tech billionaire, but you're going to have a job and you're going to be able to pay your bills and you're going to be okay.
Yeah, I agree. It's like you have financial security, you have a job security, and it's not something that's matched with any other profession. So that's one very big plus about medicine. And it's fulfilling.
Which classes did you find the most challenging and how did you manage to stay motivated through them?
Um, Definitely OChem, like organic chemistry. I'm pretty sure like 99% of med students, if you ask them, they're like, what was the most challenging class you ever taken in undergrad? They'll be like, OChem. And it's just because you're basically learning a new language. Like nothing makes sense. Like you have to build a foundation and kind of lay down the letters and then make your own words and then make full sentences and they get tested on that, right? So that's just very challenging. But the way you do it, you kind of introduce spaced repetition, you test yourself, you actively learn it, you do knowledge checks with potentially teammates if you like to learn in a classroom or in a small group. You just need to actively incorporate active learning into your study sessions because if you don't, you're going to forget things and you're not able to draw connections between different material. So introducing active learning, doing like practice questions and all that, or just teaching someone else about that particular subject is the best way to go about any studying.
Was there anything that you noticed you had to do differently as an immigrant student who was trying to transfer?
Oh, for sure. Like I had to take like when I was about to graduate high school, I had to take like an English exam to make sure like I meet their criteria. And then when I went to community college, they were like, "Oh, you only took ESL classes in um high school. You gotta take a placement exam to see where we're gonna place you for English and all that." So that was like one of the biggest hurdles, but like it is like you when you do it, then it's just like done forever. You don't have to do them ever again. But those were definitely some things I had to do, just kind of extra things that you have to do, but it makes sense. They want to make sure you have a good understanding and you're at the level that you're supposed to be and you're getting the help that you need to.
Right. And we'll end with this last question. Do you have any final advice for navigating med school as a low-income immigrant first-gen student on in terms of like a school or work-life balance?
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think the best advice I can give is just to use your resources and be efficient with your time. So, for me, what works is having a calendar and allocating enough time for different tasks, for different activities, for studying, for volunteering, for working, for resting, or for attending things that are important to me. So when I have a schedule like that, and I make sure it's somewhat fluid, so if something goes wrong, I'm able to compensate down the road or just manipulate things. So it's more kind of straightforward. So if you have something like that and you use your resources, like, okay, at my school, you have tutors, you use your tutors for the subjects that you're struggling with, that is the best combo. Like if you plan it well and you also approach your problems and the challenges you have using the resources, you're going to be able to manage things more than fine. Because remember, you're not alone in this process. So many people have done it, and so many people are in the process of doing it. And also, so many people gave up on it, but they all can give you advice on different stages of this life. and also on this journey. So make sure you take advantage of that and make sure to understand that you're never alone and there are other people that you can somewhat relate to who are able to guide you through this process. And no one is going to advocate for you unless you do. So you need to take the first step on asking like, hey, I need help. As humbling as it is, you need to do it because that's how you improve and that's how you become a better person and a better physician down the road.
All right, I think that pretty much wraps up all our questions. Thank you so much, Arad, for coming today, and thank you to all our participants and everyone who asked questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity and best of luck to everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Rod. Good seeing you.
Great seeing you, man. Take care.
Stay out of trouble.
I'll do my best.